Hello again everybody and welcome to the channel. This is the third video in the series, so do click up here to access the parameter guide playlist and navigate to any other areas within the parameter guide that might be of interest. Now, if you're new here, do consider subscribing to stay in the loop, and if you do find the content valuable, give it a like so it can reach more people like you. Now, before we get started, I would just like to mention the difference between the input and track effects, because that's what we're talking about in today's video. So for those of you who might not be aware, basically input effects are applied to your voice or instrument before you record to a track. So let's say you've got a reverb on your voice when you're singing. That can be also sent straight to the outputs if you wanted to do that, and that would bypass the track if you didn't want to record that to your loops. However, you still have the option to record that to your loops and your tracks. So that's the input effect, and then the track effect is not applied to your voice or instrument on the way in and will only be heard once that track is playing back. So let's say you've got multiple instruments on track 1 and you want your track effects to be applied to all of those loops and recordings on that particular track. That's what the track effects do. So I hope that makes sense. So in this video, I'm going to look at the memory settings again under loop. So you hit the loop button to access these settings, and I'll focus on the input and track effects options as mentioned. Now these are on pages 5 and 6 of the parameter guide if you want to have a browse over those. Now to access the input effects, first of all, we're going to press the loop button here, and then we can press it twice if we want to do that, and then we can move over to the second page, or you can just press it the once and then page across this way, and then you'll access your input and track effects options. So obviously input effects are under this button here, so we're going to push this down and see what parameters we've got, and there you go. So first up, we're going to talk about effects A to D. Now you can see I've got bank A selected at the top. I will talk about the difference between the banks and the effects, because it does get a little bit confusing when you've got banks A to D and then you've got effects A to D. I can see how some people might get a little bit confused with that, but I'll try and break things down as easy as possible. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit as well, because you can see here we've got input effect A, B and C, and I'm going to talk about these are going to light up in a minute, so I'm just going to talk about that in a moment. But basically these switches determine which of your effects are switched on or off from A to D. Now you can see I've only got A, B and C. There isn't a D because this is where my track effects options start. So nothing's going to happen over here because we're only going to see by default A, B and C light up. So if I just turn this knob here, you can see I'm turning effect A on. So you can see that by its lighting up here. And if I want to turn effect B on, I can do that. And if I want to turn effect C on, I can do that. So you can see A, B and C. If I had D set to this pedal, you would see this light turn on as well. But because we're just talking about the default settings, we'll just talk about A, B, and C. So now if I page across, you can see my first option on the left-hand side is the effects bank. And that determines which bank of effects I'm using to control and operate. So you can see I've got a couple of different settings there. Bank B is on single mode, bank A and D and C are on multi-mode. So you can see there's a slightly different option there. So you can determine which bank of effects you want to operate. If I just turn on my effects, if I go across here and turn on my 3 effects, A, B and C for bank A, and then page across, you can see I can move to bank B, the lights will go out, and then I can control and operate the parameters within those other banks. I can come back to bank A, you can see that they're still switched on. So the next one along here is the switch to determine whether that bank of effects is turned on or off. So if you just wanted to disable bank A because you're not using it, then you just switch it off and then you won't hear any effects within bank A. The next one along is the mode, and I've got multi set by default. So if I just pan out a little bit for you, you can see I've got my A, B and C input effects here, and if I'm on multi, I can choose to turn on multiple effects at the same time. So that's, let's say I've got a reverb and a delay and whatever, a chorus might have on for my guitar on bank A. Let's say I'm using bank A for my guitar effects. I can have all 3 of those on at the same time if I'm set to multi. Now if I just disable those and switch down to single, now what's going to happen is I'm going to turn on effect A, and when I hit effect B, effect A turns off, and then when I hit effect C, effect B turns off. So it's only letting me toggle between one of those effects within that bank at the same time. So the next one along is the effects target I use to control this knob here. So here I can basically turn the knob to go to different effects within a bank, and I can use my external expression pedal, as it says in the parameter guide, to control or to change the intensity of a particular effect within a bank. Now, I don't actually use this option myself. If I'm using my external expression pedal, I control the parameters within an effect in a different way, and I'll talk about this in another video. So we've basically covered everything within the input effect options, but now we have to delve into each of our input effects to find other parameters that will be useful for us. So if I just exit out of this and go back into my input effects this way, and then choose one of my input effects A to D. Let's say I'm going to choose input effect A. Don't forget I'm in bank A. I'm going to press this down, and now I've got a reverb selected for my input effect A. So there's lots of different controls and parameters if I page across within the reverb settings, but we're not going to talk about them today. I'm going to page to the left, and then I've got 3 other options here that we're going to talk about next. So a nice and easy one to start with. This one is just a switch to determine whether that effect is turned on or off. So you can see here I can turn it on and off by selecting the left hand knob, and you can see it's lighting up. Or as before, I'm going to press a pedal. You can see that switch is going on and off, and the light is going on and off as well. So the next one along is the switch mode, and you can see actually it's set to toggle by default, and all this means is when I push down on the pedal, the effect turns on. I push it a second time, the effect turns off. So I'm just toggling between the effects. So let's say I want my effect to be applied, I'm playing or I'm singing, and then when I want that effect to be disengaged, I press the pedal a second time and it's off. Now if I switch to moment, what this means is the effect is only being applied when I hold the pedal down. So I'm going to hold the pedal down, I'm going to keep pressure on it, and then I can use that effect, and then when I release from the pedal, that means the effect is no longer engaged. So it depends on your preference and how long you want certain effects to be applied for. Let's say I'm singing a song and I've got some harmony I just want to be applied for a few seconds, then it's easier for me to just lean forward and push down for a few seconds whilst I'm singing some harmony, and then take my foot off, rather than turn it off, sing, and then press it a second time. So again, it's just going to depend on your preference, how you want to have your switch mode. So next to switch mode, we've got the option to insert our input effects to whichever instruments or microphones we want to send those effects. So you can see I'm obviously in bank A and I'm using effect A. So it depends where I want to send this effect to. At the moment it is set to all. And they're all going to be set to all by default, so you can choose to send them to mics. So I've got mic 1 and 2, or I can send it to instrument 1 and 2. So that's just going to depend on where you want your certain effects to go to. So let me give you a couple of options. Let's say I want effect A just to be applied to my microphone. So I'll go into effect A and I'll page to the left, and then I can insert that effect to just go to mic 1 if I'm going to be using that, say, for my vocal microphone. And then I want effect B, which is this one here, just go into my guitar. So I'll page left again, and I'm just going to send this to instrument 1, which will be my guitar. If you are having some issues sending your input effects to your tracks, this could be one of the things to help you fix that. So if I go into my input effect here, and I've got it set to all, which means it's going to be applied to all of my instruments, but maybe it's not working correctly for you. What that might mean is if I just exit out of this and go page left into my track, let's say I'm having a problem recording to track 1, it might be, as mentioned in an earlier video, that my effects are not turned on for track 1. So you will need to make sure that this is turned on in order for your input effects to be applied. It's also worth noting as well that even though it is set to all, you might be still having some issues, and that's because the machine can't send a certain signal to your outputs if they've not been routed correctly with certain inputs. It gets quite complicated, but I'll try and cover that in another video. And then the final setting within input effects, if I just page across, I've got on the left hand side effect type. So here I can just pick and choose which effect I want to be applied, and you can see I'm in bank A and it's effect A. So let's say I want this panning delay. I'm going to use my switch here to turn on and off the panning delay, and you can see I've got other parameters within that effect to control, and I'll try and cover as much as possible in another video. Now the options for track effects are exactly the same, except for the insert option. So they're also located under loop. I'm going to press it twice, and earlier we talked about the input effects, and now I'm going to press down the track effects, and you'll see it looks virtually the same. And I've a page across, I've got the same options that I had with the input effects. I'm just going to go into one of the track effects. I'm going to go into track effect A. You can see it's a beat scatter is the effect type. And when I page left this time, I've got the option to insert that, not to the instruments like it did in the input effects, but now it's going to the tracks. So let's say I just want that beat scatter being applied to track 1, then I would just select track 1. And then if I come out of that one, I want a different input effect. I want that, track effect. I want that flanger now going to track 2, then I'll just send it to track 2 like that. So there we go, folks, the input and track effect parameter guide options on the RC-600. Next up in the series, I'll talk about the final 2 areas under loop, and that is rhythm and name. I'll try and cover them both in the same video. Click on the playlist on screen to check out other videos in the series, and as always, if you found it useful, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel to stay in the loop, and you can support the channel through the various links below, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta!